Commander Hyojin stared at the glowing screen in front of her. The numbers made no sense at all. Her long purple fingers tapped against the metal desk as she read. The same data for the fifth time. The ship around her hummed quietly as it floated. In the darkness of space, far from any star, the third planet in this yellow star system was different from anything she had ever seen in her 40 years of exploring space. Every other world they found was either empty or had simple life forms that crawled around in the dirt, but this blue and green world was sending out strange signals that hurt her head to think about. Her science officer walked over to her with his 4 arms carrying different scanning devices. His orange skin was darker than usual, which meant he was worried about something. His large black eyes looked at the data and then looked at her commander. "The readings are getting stranger," he said in his quiet voice. "The creatures on this planet are doing something that should not be possible. They are putting themselves inside metal containers and shooting those containers through the air at incredible speed." Jin felt her stomach twist. This was exactly the kind of behavior that the Galactic Safety Council had warned them about. Dangerous species that did not care about their own lives were usually the ones that tried to hurt other species. "To show me," she said. The big screen in front of them lit up with images from the planet below. Hyojin watched as dozens of white metal tubes with wings shot across the blue sky, leaving trails of white smoke behind them. Inside each tube were the planet's dominant species, and they were not screaming or trying to escape. They were just sitting there as if flying around in controlled explosions was completely normal. The creatures looked strange too. They had only 2 arms and 2 legs like some of the other species in the galaxy, but their skin was different colors ranging from very light to very dark. They had hair on the top of their heads that came in many colors, and they covered their bodies with colorful fabrics. But the most disturbing thing was how they moved. They walked on only 2 legs instead of 4 or 6 like most intelligent species, and they did it without falling over. Their balance was perfect, even though it should have been impossible. "Commander, look at this," Tejo said as he pointed to another screen. "This shows what they do when they are not flying around in those dangerous machines." The screen showed the creatures doing even more impossible things. They were jumping out of perfectly good flying machines with nothing but pieces of fabric to slow them down. They were throwing themselves off high cliffs with long stretchy ropes tied to their legs. They were getting into small boats and riding down rushing water that could easily kill them. And they were laughing while they did it. Laughter was something that most species in the galaxy understood. It was a sound that meant happiness or joy. But these creatures were laughing while doing things that should terrify any intelligent being. "We need to make contact," Hyojin said, even though every part of her wanted to turn the ship around and leave. "This is too important to ignore. The Galactic Council needs to know about this species." It took 3 days to establish communication. The creatures called themselves humans, and they spoke in hundreds of different languages, which was already strange since most species had 1 or maybe 2 languages, but the humans had thousands of ways to talk to each other. First human they talked to was a female named So-Young Kim. She was a doctor, which meant she was supposed to be intelligent and careful, but when she appeared on their communication screen, she did something that made every alien on the ship step backward. She smiled, smiling. It was when a creature showed its teeth, and across the entire galaxy, showing teeth meant the same thing. It was a threat. It was a warning that said, "I'm going to hurt you if you do not leave me alone immediately." Every intelligent species knew this rule, but this human, So-Young, was showing her white teeth and making happy sounds. At the same time, she was treating the smile like it was a good thing. Her eyes were bright, and her voice was warm and friendly, even though she was clearly threatening them. "Welcome to Earth," she said in the human language they had learned to understand. "I am so excited to meet you. This is the most wonderful day in human history." Toho whispered to Hyojin that the human was either completely insane or they had discovered a species that used threat displays as greetings. Neither option was comfortable. The conversation got more disturbing when So-Young asked if they would like to visit the planet. The aliens explained that they needed to understand human culture first to avoid any accidents. So-Young laughed again, which still sounded like a threat, and said she had the perfect way to show them what humans were like. She invited them to something called a dinner party ambassador. Jinwoo was chosen to represent the humans at this dinner party. He was a middle-aged male with dark hair and kind eyes who wore a black suit that looked very formal. He seemed much more normal than So Young until he started talking about the food. "We have prepared some of our favorite dishes for you," he said, as he led them into a large room filled with tables and chairs. The smell in the room was incredible. It was like nothing the aliens had ever experienced before. Some smells were sweet, some were rich and deep, and some smells made their noses burn in a way that should have been a warning. The first dish Jinwoo brought them looked safe enough. It was white and seemed to be some kind of grain, but when Taeho took a small bite, his mouth immediately started burning like fire. His orange skin turned bright red and he started making choking sounds. "This is called rice with kimchi," Jinwoo said happily. "It's fermented vegetables that we bury in the ground for months until they develop a strong flavor and lots of healthy bacteria." The aliens stared at him. Fermented meant rotted, and bacteria were the tiny creatures that made food dangerous to eat, but Jinwoo was eating the same food and smiling while he did it. The next dish was even worse. Jinwoo called it bulgogi and explained that it was meat that had been soaked in a sauce made from plants that were specifically designed to cause pain. The sauce contained something called capsaicin, which was a chemical that plants used to stop animals from eating them. "But humans," he said as he took a big bite, "do not let plants tell us what to do. We eat them anyway, and we enjoy the pain because it makes the food more interesting." 3 of the alien diplomats had to go to the medical bay after trying the human food. Their bodies simply could not handle substances that were meant to cause harm, but the humans ate everything without any problems. They even seemed to enjoy the foods that hurt them the most. The evening got stranger when Jinwoo brought out something he called alcohol. This was a liquid that was actually poisonous to most life forms, but humans drank it on purpose because they said it made them feel relaxed and happy. They had parties where the whole point was to drink enough poison to change how their brains worked. Commander Hyojin watched Jinwoo pour the clear liquid into small glasses and offer them to her team. She politely declined, but noticed that Jinwoo drank his entire glass in one quick motion and then smiled, that terrifying tooth-showing smile again. "This is soju," he said. "It's made from rice and it helps us celebrate important occasions like meeting new friends from space friends." The humans were calling them friends even though they had just met, and they were celebrating by consuming poison together. As the evening continued, the aliens learned more disturbing facts about humans. They discovered that humans would often eat foods that were trying to kill them, just because they liked the challenge. They learned that humans had parties where they intentionally scared each other for fun. They found out that humans created art by putting dangerous chemicals on flat surfaces and then staring at the results for hours. But the most disturbing discovery came at the end of the evening when So Young returned to check on the diplomatic meeting. She was still smiling her threatening smile, and she asked if the aliens had enjoyed their introduction to human culture. When Hyojin carefully explained that they found human behavior confusing and potentially dangerous, So Young laughed again and said something that would haunt the alien crew for the rest of their journey. "Oh, this was just the basic stuff," she said with her eyes sparkling with joy. "Wait until you see what we do for real entertainment tomorrow. We can show you our amusement parks where we built machines specifically designed to make us think we are going to die, and then we pay money to ride them." The alien diplomats looked at each other with growing concern. They had thought the flying machines were bad enough, but now they were learning that humans built devices whose only purpose was to simulate mortal danger for enjoyment. As their ship left Earth orbit that night, Commander Hyojin began writing her report to the Galactic Council. She did not know how to explain what they had discovered. The humans seemed friendly and intelligent, but they also seemed to enjoy everything that should kill them. At the top of her report she wrote, "Species classification unknown," and then stared at the words for a long time. She had a feeling that humans were going to change everything the galaxy thought it knew about intelligent life. Dr. Nari-Yoon had studied biology for over 60 years across dozens of different worlds. She thought she understood how living creatures worked. Their bodies needed rest, their wounds needed medical attention, and their energy had limits. But the humans on this blue planet were breaking every rule she knew about life. She stood in her laboratory aboard the research ship watching data streams that made no sense. The human volunteer sleeping in the next room had been awake for 37 hours straight, and his body was still functioning normally. Most intelligent species would have collapsed after 20 hours, but this human named Dong Hyan was still alert and active. The sleep study was supposed to be simple. They would measure how much rest humans needed compared to other species, but Dong Hyan kept asking for more tasks to complete. He said he was used to staying awake for days when he was in something called medical school, where humans learned to heal other humans. Nari checked the readings again. Dong Hyan's brain was working at nearly full capacity. His reflexes were only slightly slower than when he started, and his mood was still positive. This should not be possible without advanced stimulants or bioenhancement technology, but the humans refused all artificial aids. When we need to stay awake, we just drink coffee, Dong Hyan explained. Coffee was a brown liquid made from ground seeds that contained a mild stimulant called caffeine. Most species would need laboratory-grade chemicals to achieve the same results, but humans got their energy boost from plant seeds. The real shock came during the healing demonstration. Nari had asked Dong Hyan to show her how humans dealt with minor injuries. Every civilized species had medical nanobots or healing rays, or at least sterile surgical environments, but when Dong Hyan accidentally cut his finger while preparing food, he just held it under running water. The water on this planet was not even sterile. It contained minerals and sometimes bacteria that could cause infection, but Dong Hyan seemed completely unconcerned. He wrapped the cut with a simple cloth and continued working while his body began healing itself without any technological help. Over the next few days, Nari watched in amazement as the wound closed on its own. New skin grew to replace the damaged tissue, and within a week, there was barely a mark to show where the injury had been. The human body had literally rebuilt itself using nothing but nutrients from food and time. This is normal for us, Dong Hyan said when Nari asked about the healing process. Our bodies know how to fix themselves unless the damage is really serious. Then we go to hospitals where doctors help us heal faster. Nari requested permission to observe a human hospital, and what she found there challenged everything she believed about medical science. Humans were healing from injuries that would require months of advanced treatment. For other species, they recovered from diseases by simply resting and drinking liquids. They even had a process called surgery, where they would cut open their own bodies to fix problems inside, and then trust their natural healing to close the wounds. But the most incredible discovery came when her research team decided to test human physical endurance. They had heard stories about human athletes and wanted to see if the reports were exaggerated, so they organized a competition between the best alien athletes and a human volunteer named Minho. The aliens wore their most advanced biosuits that enhanced muscle performance and provided extra oxygen. They took energy supplements that could keep most species running for hours. Their equipment alone cost more than most planets. Made in a Minho wore simple fabric shorts, a thin shirt, and shoes made of rubber and cloth. He carried only water in a plastic bottle and seemed completely relaxed about competing against technologically enhanced aliens. The test was simple: run until you cannot run anymore. The aliens were confident that their superior technology would give them an easy victory. They had calculated exactly how much energy the human body could produce, and they knew their equipment could exceed those limits. For the first 2 hours, the race seemed normal. The aliens maintained a steady pace while their biosuits monitored their vital signs and adjusted their performance. Minho ran beside them, looking comfortable and occasionally making friendly conversation, which the aliens found disturbing since talking while running should waste valuable energy. After 4 hours, the first alien began to slow down despite his advanced equipment. His biosuit was providing maximum support, but his body was reaching its limits. The other aliens were also showing signs of fatigue, while Minho seemed to be just getting started. 6 hours into the race, 3 more aliens had stopped running. Their biosuits were flashing warning signals about dangerous stress levels, and automatic safety protocols were forcing them to rest. Minho was still running at the same steady pace he had maintained from the beginning. 8 hours later, only 2 aliens were still in the race, and their biosuits were operating at emergency power levels, trying to keep their bodies functional. Minho was still running, but now he was doing something that terrified the watching researchers. He was smiling, and his eyes had taken on a strange, distant look. "This is great," he called Out to the research team, I am finally getting into the zone. The zone turned out to be a mental state where humans could ignore pain, fatigue, and discomfort while their bodies continued functioning long past normal limits. It was like their consciousness could disconnect from physical sensations and operate on pure determination. After 12 hours, the last alien competitor collapsed from exhaustion. Despite having every technological advantage available, Minho was still running and showed no signs of stopping. When Nari asked him how much longer he could continue, he shrugged his shoulders and said he once ran for 18 hours during something called a marathon race. We evolved to hunt this way, Minho explained as he continued running at the same steady pace our ancestors would chase animals across long distances until the prey died from exhaustion. Most animals are faster than humans over short distances, but we can outlast almost anything over long distances. Nari realized she was looking at a persistence predator that had somehow developed intelligence. This was supposed to be impossible. Intelligent species gave up physical prowess in favor of brain development, but humans had kept both their endurance and their reasoning ability. The research team watched Minho run for 6 more hours before they finally asked him to stop. The alien medical staff needed to understand how his body was managing such extreme performance without technological assistance. What they discovered changed their understanding of biology itself. The human cardiovascular system was incredibly efficient at delivering oxygen to muscles. The human body could burn different types of fuel depending on availability, switching from simple sugars to stored fats to even breaking down muscle tissue in extreme situations. But most impressive was the human cooling system. They released water through their skin in a process called sweating that kept their internal temperature stable even during intense activity. Most species would overheat and die long before reaching such extremes, but humans just kept producing sweat and running. The final test came when Nari asked Minho to demonstrate human recovery time after running for 18 hours. He should need days or weeks to return to normal function. Instead, he drank some water, ate some food, and took what he called a nap for 8 hours. When he woke up, Minho was ready to run again. His body had completely recovered from an ordeal that would have hospitalized most alien species for months. He even asked if they wanted to try the test again because he felt like he could do better the second time that night. Nari worked late writing her report to the Galactic Medical Council. The humans were not just unusual, they were physically impossible by all known standards of biology. They could function without adequate rest, heal without medical intervention, and perform feats of endurance that should kill them. At the bottom of her report, she added a personal note: these creatures appear to have evolved as living weapons designed for persistence. Hunting, their bodies are built to never give up, never stop, and never accept defeat. This could explain their rapid technological development and aggressive expansion across their planet. She paused before adding the final line: the humans may be the most dangerous species we have ever encountered, not because they are violent, but because they simply do not know when to quit. The implications were terrifying. If humans applied the same endless persistence to space exploration that they used for hunting prey on their planet, then no distance would be too far, no challenge too difficult, and no goal too ambitious for them to achieve. Nari looked out at the blue planet below and wondered if the galaxy was ready for a species that had turned stubbornness into an evolutionary advantage. Psychologist Dahai had spent her entire career studying how intelligent minds worked across the galaxy. She understood the basic emotional patterns that all sentient species shared. Fear meant danger, joy meant success, anger meant conflict. These were universal constants that made sense to every thinking creature. But the humans were destroying everything she thought she knew about emotions. She sat in her observation chamber watching her latest test subject through a one-way window. The human female named the Jin was experiencing what should have been impossible according to every scanner and brain monitor in the room. The Jin was feeling happiness and sadness at exactly the same time. This violation of basic emotional logic had started 3 days ago when the Jin received news that her grandmother had died. Most species followed the same grief pattern when losing family members. They would isolate themselves, stop eating properly, and remain inactive until the sadness passed. But the Jin was doing something completely different. Instead of withdrawing from social contact, She had immediately called dozens of other humans and invited them to gather together. They were having something called a funeral celebration where they shared stories about the dead grandmother while laughing and crying simultaneously. Ahai watched through her monitors as groups of humans filled Dajin's home. They'd brought food, flowers, and pictures of the deceased grandmother. Everyone was sad about the death, but they were also celebrating the life the grandmother had lived. It was like they were experiencing grief and joy as partner emotions instead of opposing forces. The strangest part was how the shared suffering seemed to make the humans stronger instead of weaker. When one person started crying, others would comfort them. When someone told a funny story about the grandmother, everyone would laugh together. Even though they were all experiencing loss, they were using it as a way to bond more deeply with each other. Ahai tried to understand this through her scientific training, but nothing in galactic psychology could explain what she was seeing. The humans were taking the most negative emotion possible and somehow transforming it into a positive social experience. Her confusion deepened when she began studying human entertainment choices. She discovered that humans voluntarily exposed themselves to fear during their leisure time. They watched recorded stories specifically designed to terrify them and then discussed these experiences as enjoyable activities. Test subject Jae-sung demonstrated this by showing her something called a horror movie. It was a visual story about dangerous creatures hunting humans in dark places. The entire purpose was to make viewers feel afraid, unsafe, and anxious. But Jae-sung watched it while eating snacks and making happy sounds. This is one of my favorites, he explained, as monsters chase screaming humans across the screen. I love how it makes my heart race and gives me that adrenaline rush. It's like being in real danger, but knowing I'm actually safe. Ahai needed 3 different translation programs to understand how fear could be categorized as entertainment. Every other species in the galaxy avoided fear whenever possible because it indicated immediate threats to survival. But humans had somehow learned to enjoy the sensation. When they knew the danger was not real, the research became even more disturbing. When she studied human attachment patterns, most intelligent species formed bonds with family members, others of their species, and occasionally with useful animals or tools. But humans formed emotional connections with everything. Test subject Kite had developed what he called love for his transportation vehicle. He gave it a name, talked to it like it was alive, and became genuinely distressed when it needed repairs. He treated a collection of metal and plastic components like it was a family. "Remember, this is my car, Sunny," he explained while gently patting the vehicle's exterior surface. "She has been with me for 8 years, and we have traveled everywhere together. I know exactly how she sounds when she is happy, and I can tell when something is bothering her." Ahai ran every psychological test available, but the results were always the same. Kite was not mentally disturbed or delusional. He simply had the capacity to form genuine emotional bonds with inanimate objects. This ability extended to fictional characters, abstract concepts, and even places he had never visited. Humans could love their childhood homes, feel protective toward strangers they saw on news broadcasts, and develop passionate feelings about ideas that existed only in their minds. They seemed capable of unlimited emotional expansion, where most species had strict limits on how many bonds they could maintain. But the most remarkable discovery came when Dahai studied human recovery from emotional trauma. She expected to find evidence of permanent psychological damage from the various hardships humans faced throughout their lives. Instead, she found something that challenged her understanding of mental health. Humans could not only recover from emotional injuries, they could use those experiences to become stronger and wiser. They had developed something called post-traumatic growth, where surviving difficult situations actually improved their psychological resilience and capacity for empathy. Subject Woojin had survived a terrible accident that killed several of his friends. Instead of being permanently damaged by this trauma, he had become more appreciative of life, more compassionate toward others, and more determined to help people in similar situations. He had transformed his worst experience into his greatest source of strength. We learned from everything, Woojin explained when Dahai asked how he had recovered. Good experiences teach us what to seek out. Bad experiences teach us what to avoid and how to help others who face similar challenges. Both types of learning make us more complete as people, this concept of voluntary. Emotional growth was unprecedented in galactic psychology. Most species tried to avoid negative experiences entirely, but humans seemed to understand that discomfort was necessary for psychological development. They embraced difficulty as a teacher rather than an enemy. The final test nearly broke Ahai's scientific objectivity. She asked human subjects to explain their species' capacity for forgiveness, expecting to find cultural or religious programming that forced them to overcome natural revenge instincts. Instead, she discovered that humans forgave others not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They understood that holding anger hurt them more than it hurt the people who had wronged them, so they chose to release negative emotions in favor of moving forward with their lives. Some humans even maintain positive relationships with individuals who had previously harmed them. This is not logical by any galactic standard, she wrote in her research notes. Forgiveness should be rare and difficult, requiring extensive social pressure or evolutionary necessity, but humans forgive easily and often simply because they prefer emotional peace over emotional conflict. Her report to the Galactic Psychology Institute was rejected 3 times because the reviewers insisted that her data must be corrupted. No species could survive with such chaotic and contradictory emotional patterns, but Ahai knew her research was accurate. Humans had somehow evolved beyond the basic emotional limitations that constrained other intelligent species. They could feel multiple emotions simultaneously, transform negative experiences into positive growth, and form unlimited emotional connections without losing psychological stability. The final entry in her research log read, "These creatures appear to have weaponized emotion itself. They use feelings that should weaken them as sources of strength. They bond with anything and everything, creating social networks of unprecedented complexity. They recover from trauma by growing stronger rather than simply healing." She paused to consider the implications. If humans could form emotional bonds with other species as easily as they bonded with everything else, then first contact was not just a diplomatic meeting, it was the beginning of the most powerful alliance the galaxy had ever seen. Ahai looked at her data one more time and realized that humans were not just psychologically unusual, they were emotionally superior to every other known species. Their feelings were not weaknesses to be controlled, but tools to be used for connection growth and survival. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when infinite emotional capacity met infinite persistence. Art analyst Haiyan Wu had documented creative expression across 47 different worlds and thought he understood how intelligence developed artistic abilities. Most species created functional art that served practical purposes or ritualistic art that reinforced social structures, but the humans were doing something that broke every rule of aesthetic development. He stood in what humans called an art gallery, staring at a canvas covered in paint splatters that seemed completely random. The human artist Subin stood beside him, explaining that the chaotic splashes represented her emotional response to a sunset she had seen 3 years ago, but it does not look like a sunset, Haiyan Wu said, trying to understand the connection between the natural phenomenon and the paint marks. "That is the point," Subin replied with excitement. "I'm not trying to copy what the sunset looked like. I'm trying to show how the sunset made me feel. The colors and movements in this painting represent the emotions I experience, not the visual appearance." Concept of emotional representation through abstract forms was completely alien to galactic art traditions. Most species created accurate depictions of important events, people, or objects, but humans created visual metaphors for internal experiences that could not be seen or measured. The confusion deepened when Subin showed him something called installation art. She had filled an entire room with broken mirrors hanging at different angles. Each mirror reflected light in ways that created shifting patterns on the walls and floor. Visitors were supposed to walk through the space and experience how the changing reflections made them feel. "There is no practical purpose," Haiyan Wu observed. "This installation does not teach skills, preserve history, or honor achievements. Why do humans invest time in creating experiences that serve no function?" Subin looked at him with surprise, as if he had asked why humans needed to breathe. "Art does not have to be useful," she explained. "It just has to make us think or feel something new." The experience of beauty or wonder or confusion is valuable by itself. She led him to another section, where humans were creating art from discarded materials. An artist named Jun-ho had taken broken electronic devices, rusty metal pieces, and worn fabric to create sculptures that somehow looked alive and graceful. He was transforming waste into beauty using nothing but imagination and skill. This is recycled art, Jun-ho explained as he welded two pieces of scrap metal together. I find objects that other people have thrown away, and I give them new life and purpose. Everything can be beautiful if you look at it the right way and have the creativity to see its potential. Wu watched Jun-ho work for hours. The human could look at any broken, useless object and visualize how it could become part of something magnificent. He seemed to see possibilities that did not exist until he created them with his own hands. But the most disturbing discovery came when Subin introduced him to something called fan fiction. She had taken characters from existing stories and created entirely new adventures for them, spending dozens of hours writing tales that would never be officially recognized or financially rewarded. When Hyun-woo asked why she invested so much effort in scenarios that were not real, Subin explained that the creative process itself brought her joy. She liked exploring how familiar characters might react in different situations, and she enjoyed sharing these stories with other humans who had similar interests across the galaxy. Art served specific social functions. It preserved cultural memory, demonstrated technical skill, or displayed wealth and status, but human creativity seemed to exist purely for the pleasure of creation itself. They made art because they enjoyed making art, not because it served any practical purpose. The research team discovered that humans created artistic expressions from everything. Music was made by combining sounds and patterns that should not work mathematically, but somehow pleased human ears. They wrote stories about events that never happened and became emotionally invested in fictional characters. They even created art with their food, arranging meals to be visually beautiful before eating them. Most shocking was their collaborative creativity. Humans would take existing artistic works and modify them or combine them with other works to create something entirely new. They called this sampling or remixing, and they treated it as a legitimate form of creative expression rather than copying. Artist Min Seo demonstrated this by showing them a piece she had created using fragments of hundreds of different songs. She had taken small sections from each musical work and woven them together into a new composition that referenced all the originals while creating something completely unique. I am having a conversation with all the musicians who came before me, she explained. Each sample is like a word in a musical language. By combining them in new ways, I can say things that have never been said before, even though I'm using existing elements. This collaborative approach to creativity was unprecedented in galactic art history. Most species guarded their artistic innovations carefully to maintain individual recognition, but humans freely shared techniques, ideas, and even partial works so that others could build upon their creativity. The breaking point came when Hyun-woo observed human problem-solving in non-artistic contexts. The research ship had been struggling with a malfunctioning environmental system for weeks, and their best engineers could not figure out how to repair the complex alien technology. When Jun-ho volunteered to examine the device, Hyun-woo expected him to fail immediately. The environmental system was built using principles completely foreign to human technology and required specialized knowledge that Jun-ho did not possess. Instead, Jun-ho approached the problem like an art project. He ignored the technical manuals and official repair procedures. Instead, he studied how the system looked, sounded, and felt when it was running. He paid attention to subtle patterns in the machinery that the alien engineers had dismissed as irrelevant. Within 6 hours, Jun-ho had not only repaired the system, but improved its efficiency by 30%. He had used spare parts from the ship's recycling system and connected them in ways that violated standard engineering principles, but somehow worked perfectly. How did you know what to do? Hyun-woo asked as he watched the environmental system run better than it had in years. I did not know, Jun-ho replied. I just tried things that felt right based on how the machine seemed to want to work. Every system has its own personality and rhythm. If you pay attention to those patterns, you can usually find creative solutions. This approach was completely Illogical by galactic engineering standards, problems were supposed to be solved through systematic analysis and established procedures. But Junho had treated the broken machine like a creative challenge and found a solution that professional engineers had. Misady and Wu realized that human creativity was not just artistic expression. It was a survival mechanism that allowed them to find solutions where none should exist. They could imagine possibilities that did not currently exist, and then make those possibilities real through sheer creative will. His report to the Galactic Arts Council was classified as too dangerous for public release. The implications were staggering. If humans could create solutions to any problem using nothing but imagination and determination, then they were not just artists. They were reality sculptors who could reshape the universe according to their creative vision. The final line of his classified report read, "Human creativity appears unlimited. By logical constraints, they create for the joy of creation, solve problems through artistic intuition, and find beauty in chaos." When this unlimited creative capacity is combined with their documented persistence and emotional resilience, they become capable of achieving impossible goals through impossible methods. Xin Wu submitted the report and requested immediate transfer to a different research project. He had seen enough to know that humans were not just another intelligent species. They were imagination made manifest, and that terrified him more than any weapon the galaxy had ever produced, because weapons could be defended against. But how do you defend against a species that could imagine new ways to do everything? Sociologist Yunji had studied pack behavior, tribal structures, and social hierarchies across dozens of species for over 50 years. She understood how intelligent creatures organized themselves for survival. Families stayed together for genetic advantage. Alliances formed for mutual protection, and social bonds developed to improve resource sharing. But the humans had weaponized friendship itself. She watched through her observation monitors as test subject Wu Jin interacted with the research team. He had met these aliens only 5 days ago, yet he was already treating them like family members. He brought them food, asked about their home planets, and seemed genuinely concerned about their comfort and well-being. This behavior made no evolutionary sense. Wu Jin gained no genetic advantage from caring about alien researchers. He received no resources or protection from forming bonds with creatures from different planets. Yet he was investing emotional energy in their welfare as if they were his own relatives. The first crisis test came when the research ship experienced a simulated emergency. The alien crew staged a fake system failure that appeared to threaten everyone aboard. Most intelligent species would prioritize their own safety in such situations, but Wu Jin immediately began helping the alien researchers evacuate. When Yunji asked him later why he had risked his life for creatures he barely knew, Wu Jin looked confused by the question. "You were in danger," he said simply, as if this explained everything. "Why would I not help you?" This response violated every principle of survival psychology. Self-preservation should override social concern when facing mortal threats. But Wu Jin had automatically prioritized the safety of others over his own survival without even thinking about it. The investigation deepened when Yunji studied human family structures. She expected to find typical genetic loyalty patterns where individuals favored relatives who shared their DNA. Instead, she discovered something that challenged the foundations of social science. Humans created what they called chosen families. These were social bonds with non-relatives that were often stronger than their biological connections they formed. These chosen families based on shared interests, mutual affection, common experiences, or simple compatibility test subject. One demonstrated this by introducing her chosen family to the research team. There was her blood sister who lived far away and contacted her maybe once per month. Then there were her chosen siblings who lived nearby, visited regularly, shared meals together, and provided emotional support during difficult times. "My real family is the people who are there for me when I need them," One explained. "DNA is just biology, but love is a choice. We choose to love each other and take care of each other because we want to, not because we have to." This concept of voluntary family bonds was unprecedented in galactic sociology. Most species were programmed by evolution to favor genetic relatives above all others, but humans seemed capable of overriding biological programming through conscious decision-making, the research revealed even more disturbing social patterns. Humans formed support networks that spanned their entire planet. They created communities based on shared hobbies, professional interests, philosophical beliefs, or simply geographic proximity. These communities provided mutual aid, emotional support, and collective problem-solving. More shocking was their capacity for adopting strangers into their social groups. Test subject Young Ho invited the alien researchers to join his weekly gathering of friends. Even though the aliens were different species from different planets, Young Ho treated them exactly like his human companions. "You are welcome here anytime," he said as he shared food and conversation with creatures who had nothing in common with him, except curiosity about each other. "We believe that everyone deserves friendship and belonging regardless of where they come from." The aliens found themselves included in human social rituals, celebration of birthdays, sharing of personal stories, and group activities that served no purpose except enjoyment of each other's company. It was like being adopted into a family they never knew they wanted. But the most terrifying discovery came when Yoonji studied human conflict resolution. She expected to find typical territorial disputes, resource competition, and dominance hierarchies. Instead, she found something that should have been impossible. Humans could transform enemies into friends through patience, understanding, and what they called empathy. They possessed an almost supernatural ability to see situations from other perspectives and find common ground even with individuals who had previously harmed them. The research team observed this during a mediation session between two humans who had been fighting over property rights. Both individuals were angry and seemed determined to hurt each other, but a third human named Sun Woo helped them find a solution that satisfied everyone. The key was Sun Woo's ability to help each person understand how the other person felt. He asked them to explain their positions, then asked them to imagine how their opponent might see the same situation. Gradually, the anger transformed into understanding, and the understanding led to cooperation. "This is how we solve most problems," Sun Woo explained. "Everyone wants to feel heard and respected. If you can show people that you understand their perspective, they become willing to consider your perspective." Most conflicts come from misunderstanding, not true disagreement. Tunji watched Sun Woo use this technique successfully with disputes between family members, business partners, and even strangers who had never met before. It seemed like humans could create harmony from any conflict if they invested enough effort in understanding each other. The implications were staggering. If humans could transform enemies into allies through empathy and patience, then no conflict was permanent. No grudge was unforgivable, and no relationship was beyond repair. They possessed the social technology to unite anyone with anyone else. Her research expanded to study human response to other species. The results were both promising and terrifying. Humans demonstrated the same capacity for empathy and adoption with alien creatures that they showed with their own kind. Test subjects formed emotional bonds with alien researchers, invited them into their homes, and showed genuine concern for alien welfare. They seemed to view species differences as interesting variations rather than fundamental barriers to friendship. But this also meant that humans would extend their infinite loyalty and support to any species that accepted their friendship. Once humans decided someone was part of their social group, they would defend that person or creature against any threat, regardless of personal cost. The final test nearly caused a diplomatic incident. Yoonji arranged for researchers from a traditionally hostile alien species to visit the human subjects. She expected normal territorial responses, wariness, suspicion, or at least polite distance. Instead, the humans greeted the hostile aliens with the same welcoming enthusiasm they had shown to all the other researchers. They offered food, shared stories, and invited the newcomers to participate in social activities. Despite centuries of galactic conflict between the species, the humans treated everyone as potential friends. "We do not judge people by what species they belong to," explained test subject Ji-hoon. "We judge them by how they treat others. If they are kind and respectful, then we welcome them. If they are cruel or harmful, then we protect ourselves, but we still hope they can learn to be better." This approach to social interaction was completely unprecedented in galactic history. Every other species maintained careful distinctions between allies, enemies, and neutrals, but humans seemed to default to friendship unless given Specific reasons to behave otherwise. Yinye's final report to the Galactic Social Council was marked. With the highest security classification, the humans had developed social bonding abilities that could reshape galactic politics. They could create loyalty that transcended species boundaries, transform conflicts into cooperation, and build alliances. Based purely on mutual affection and respect, her concluding analysis read: human social behavior appears to be an evolutionary weapon designed to unite any group under any circumstances. They form unlimited emotional bonds, treat strangers as family, and possess conflict resolution abilities that can overcome any disagreement. She paused before adding the final warning. If humans are accepted into galactic society, their social bonding abilities will eventually unite all species into a single, cooperative alliance. This could bring unprecedented peace and prosperity, but it will also mean the end of traditional galactic power structure. The report was immediately classified and distributed to only the highest levels of galactic government. Because everyone who read it came to the same conclusion: the humans were not just another intelligent species. They were social architects who could rebuild civilization itself around the simple principle that everyone deserves friendship, and that was either the most wonderful or most dangerous thing the galaxy had ever encountered. Chief Xenobiologist Sang Ho had spent 3 months compiling data from every research team that had studied the humans. The report sat on his desk like pieces of an impossible puzzle. Each study revealed traits that should not exist in any single species, yet the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. He looked out at the blue planet Earth through his office window and tried to understand what his teams had discovered. The humans were simultaneously the most fragile and most durable species. In the galaxy, they could be killed by simple bacterial infections, yet they survived injuries that would destroy most other creatures. They were logical enough to develop advanced technology, yet emotional enough to make decisions based purely on feelings. They were individual enough to celebrate personal achievement, yet collective enough to sacrifice themselves for strangers. Without hesitation, most disturbing of all, they seemed to thrive on contradictions that should tear apart any stable society. They were peaceful warriors, creative destroyers, and social loners who built the strongest communities in known space. The medical data alone defied explanation. Humans could heal from wounds without technology, endure physical stress that would kill enhanced alien athletes, and function on minimal rest for extended periods. Their bodies were designed like biological machines, built for impossible tasks. The psychological profiles were even more confusing. Humans experienced multiple contradictory emotions simultaneously, used traumatic experiences as sources of strength, and formed unlimited emotional bonds with anything they encountered. They had weaponized feelings that should weaken them into tools that made them stronger. Their creativity operated outside all known laws of logic. They found solutions where none should exist, transformed waste into beauty, and treated every problem like an artistic challenge waiting for imagination to solve it. They created purely for the joy of creation, and somehow this made them better at everything else. But their social abilities were the most dangerous of all. They could unite anyone with anyone else, transform enemies into allies through patience and empathy, and build loyalty networks that spanned their entire planet. They had evolved beyond tribal thinking into something approaching universal friendship. Sang Ho activated his communication system and called for a final meeting with all research team leaders. He needed to understand how these impossible traits work together to create a functioning society. Dr. Nari arrived first, carrying her medical files that documented human physical capabilities. Her expression showed the same confusion that had been growing among all the researchers for months. Commander Hyojin joined them next, still struggling to understand how creatures who ate poisonous food for entertainment had managed to develop space travel. The diplomatic implications alone were giving the Galactic Council nightmares. Psychologist Dahai entered with her emotional analysis data that proved humans could use feelings as tools rather than being controlled by their emotions. Art analyst Hyunwoo brought examples of human creativity that had solved engineering problems their best technicians could not fix. Finally, sociologist Yoonji arrived with social interaction studies that suggested humans could eventually unite the entire galaxy into a single cooperative alliance through nothing More than friendship and understanding, we need to answer the fundamental question, Sang-ho announced as he looked at his assembled team. What are the humans really? The discussion lasted for hours. Each researcher presented evidence that humans violated the basic rules of evolution, psychology, physics, and social development, yet somehow these impossible creatures had built a thriving civilization and were rapidly developing the technology to expand beyond their home planet. The breakthrough came when Da-hai made a simple observation. Maybe we are asking the wrong question, she said. Instead of trying to understand why humans are impossible, maybe we should ask why they work despite being impossible. The team spent the rest of the day examining human society from this new perspective instead of looking for logical explanations. They studied how contradictory traits combined to create unexpected advantages. Humans were fragile individually but incredibly durable collectively. Their willingness to sacrifice for others meant that the group survived even when individuals did not. Their emotional complexity allowed them to maintain social bonds during conflicts that would destroy other societies. Their creativity and persistence combined to make them excellent problem solvers who never gave up on challenges. They approached every obstacle as something that could be overcome through imagination and determination rather than accepting limitations as permanent. Most importantly, their social bonding abilities meant that every human achievement became a shared achievement. The entire species benefited from individual discoveries, innovations, and improvements. They had created a civilization based on collective advancement rather than individual competition. As the meeting ended, Sang-ho realized what they had been studying. The humans were not just another intelligent species. They were evolution's experiment in breaking all the rules and seeing what happened when impossible traits were combined in a single creature. That evening, Sang-ho began writing his final report to the Galactic Council. The document would reshape how every species understood intelligent civilization and the possibilities for life in the universe. His opening statement read, after extensive study, we have determined that humans represent a new category of intelligent life that operates beyond the previously understood limits of biological and social development. They have achieved impossible capabilities through impossible methods and created a civilization that should not be able to function. Yet clearly, he continued, the humans appear to have evolved as reality hackers who can find solutions to any problem by refusing to accept that some things are impossible. Their persistence, creativity, social bonding, and emotional flexibility combine to make them capable of achieving any goal they commit to pursuing. The middle section detailed specific capabilities. Human endurance exceeds technological enhancement through biological optimization. Human creativity solves complex problems through intuitive rather than systematic approaches. Human social abilities can unite any